Welcome everyone to the California training on helping families claim the child tax credit. This webinar is co-hosted by the Partnership for America's Children, by the Coalition on Human Needs, by Children Now, by the Children's Partnership, and by the Children's Advocacy Institute. And all three of those organizations are California child advocacy organizations that are members of the Partnership for America's Children. We're really thrilled to be able to offer you this today because, as you'll learn, the newly expanded child tax credit, at least for the year 2021, can make a really significant increase in families' well-being. And with that, I am going to ask Zoe to start sharing our slides. There we go. So today's webinar is going to have a number of speakers, and we're going to try and move promptly so that you can hear from all of us. Please feel free to put your questions or comments in the Q&A section at the bottom of the screen, and we will take those questions at the end of the webinar. If you have technical problems, put them in the chat, and so we will deal with them. Our speakers today are, first of all, let's go to the next slide. The organizations that are hosting this include the Coalition of Human Needs, which is an alliance of national groups like service providers, faith groups, policy experts, and other advocates that work at the federal level to make sure that the needs of low-income children, of low-income people, are heard in federal debates and increase the knowledge of positive outcomes. Next slide. My organization, the Partnership for America's Children, has over 50 multi-issue child advocacy organizations in 40 states, including three of our other hosts. And these organizations work to improve the policies that support children and families in their states, and in this case, in California. Next slide, please. So today we're going to be talking about this opportunity to make sure that children benefit from the expanded child tax credit. And that expansion, which happened a year ago, if we can get everybody to take advantage of it, will reduce the number of children in poverty by about 40%. Maybe as important or even more important, it will lift more than 1 million children out of deep poverty so that it moves them from below the half the poverty line to above it. They'll still be poor, but they'll be much less poor and they'll do a lot better. Next slide, please. So in 2021, the child tax credit was expanded in a number of ways, including three really important ones. And many people don't realize that all three of these expansions happened. First is that families were able to get half of the child tax credit in advance payments that were made monthly between July and December of 2021. And that got a lot of public attention. People who got half of their credit in 2021 still need to file taxes this year to get the rest of it. And people who didn't get those advance payments can get the full amount when they file a tax return in 2022. Secondly, and this got much less attention, the amount of the credit was nearly doubled. So where before, where before each child, the tax credit was $2,000. In 2021, it's $3,600 for a child under age 6 and $3,000 for children ages 6 through 17. Thirdly, and this matters to the families that are hardest to reach, there's no minimum income requirement. So families that had no earned income can still get the full credit, and it's what we call fully refundable. That means a family that had no earnings in 2021, maybe they were unemployed and getting by on unemployment insurance, or they weren't eligible for that, so they were depending on families and SNAP benefits and things like that, or disabled people who were living on Social Security and raising their kids on that, or senior citizens raising grandchildren or great-grandchildren and living on Social Security. For the first time, all those kinds of families can file a tax return, and even though they have no earned income, they can get the full amount of the credit paid to them. But they don't think of themselves as taxpayers. They don't know this happened, and so they assume that the child tax credit is not for them because they don't think they're taxpayers. Next slide, please. Just to give you a sense of how important this can be for a family, imagine a family with one adult, a 4-year-old, a 13-year-old, and a 15-year-old. For the 2021 tax year, that family can get nearly $10,000, $9,600 um, in a child tax credit. And that's just from the child tax credit. So families who file a full tax return can also get the economic stimulus payment that they may well not have gotten, which is $1,400 per person. And they might get a part of an earned income tax credit payment. It's pretty easy with a family with 3 kids that never filed a tax return to see them getting closer to $20,000 for tax year 2021. And if you take a very low income family, that's a huge improvement in the quality of their life that year. It lets them make big investments in their family's long-term well-doing, everything from buying a car so they can get to more jobs, all kinds of things. I did see a question in the chat. There is a maximum income limit, and I don't remember it exactly, but it's quite high. I think it's 150,000 for a married couple. So for most of the families you're working with, it's not relevant. Next slide, please. But as I said, well, most families got that tax payment automatically. It showed up in their bank account. They got checks in the mail. Some of them got debit cards. 4 million or more children are at risk of missing out on these child tax credit payments. That's because the IRS didn't know about them. These are families that never filed a tax return because they weren't required to. Their incomes were too low. And they also, even though they knew about the existence of the economic stimulus payments, they never claimed them. They didn't get advanced payments in 2021, and they're going to miss out on the credit if they don't file a tax return this year. This is particularly important for our Black and brown kids. They were disproportionately excluded from the full child tax credit before it was expanded, and they're now more likely to miss out on it even if they're eligible. So we really need to reach them. Our organization conducted a series of focus groups with people who didn't file to find out why and what would persuade them to do it. And one of the really important things we learned is that they trust community organizations like Head Start agencies or childcare providers, teachers, and they also trust local agencies of this, state government. So WIC programs and SNAP agencies. If they get information from them about being eligible for the credit, they will listen to you. So you can play an important role in helping these families get the credit. And you don't need to be a tax expert to help them claim it. What you need to do is connect them to people who can help them file that tax return. Next slide, please. So here quickly is what it takes to be eligible to get the credit. The adult does not have to be a documented resident in this country or a citizen. They can either file with a social security number or with an ITIN, an individual taxpayer assisted identification number, which is a number you can get from the IRS, even if you do not have documentation to be resident here. And millions of people file a tax return using that ITIN every year. It's very safe. However, the children must have social security numbers, and any child born in this country can get a social security number. In addition, the tax filer has to have a particular relationship with the child they're claiming. And that relationship can be the biological or adopted parent. The child can be their grandchild, their stepchild, their younger sibling or step sibling or half sibling or their descendant, or a foster child placed by the government, a government agency. They can't be a wider one. So for example, second cousins, you can't claim. But if they have one of these relationships, they can claim the child. Thirdly, the child has to have lived with the adult in the United States for more than half the year, 6 months and a day. And there are some exceptions like babies who were born in the second half of the year. And finally, the adult had to be supporting the child. The child could not be providing for half of their own support. Next slide, please. So as we said, most families automatically got those payments last year because the IRS knew about them. But those families need to file tax returns this year to get the second half of the payments. And families that didn't get the advance payments need to file and they can get the full credit. As we said, they need help understanding why they should file and how to get help. Next slide, please. So this is a quick chart of the timeline, and I'm sharing it with you because It's important to understand that while the tax season officially ends April 18th, in fact, people can file to claim the child tax credit through the end of the year. So right now we're in the middle of the tax season. VITA sites, volunteer income tax assistance sites, are open. We're going to hear from some of them so that you understand how they can help. And people who are legally obligated to file, which is typically an income for a married couple of over about 25,000, and for a head of household, I think it's a little over 18,000. In theory, they're supposed to file by April 18th. But in practice, if they don't file by April 18th, they can go ahead and file later and claim the credit, and they won't owe a penalty, because you're only owe a penalty if you didn't pay your taxes on April 18th, whether you filed the return or not. If you don't owe taxes, if you're getting money back, there's no penalty. Moreover, families with the lower income who weren't required to, they can always file even if they never requested an extension. So that means that we're going to keep working to get these families their tax returns and their tax credit throughout the year. And in fact, in May of this year, the IRS will be partnering with an organization called Code for America, which will be opening a simplified online portal, which will make it easy for people who are not required to file their taxes to claim the child tax credit and potentially that third economic stimulus payment. They won't be able to claim other credits they might be eligible for, but if they don't have the documentation or they're intimidated by the process, this is an easier option for some people. And that portal is going to stay available and open through late fall of 2022. Next slide, please. This slide just walks you through how to help someone who doesn't have an ITIN claim it. The important thing to know is that they have to file a paper tax return and submit Form W7 and copies of their identity with it. And the best way to do that is to take all their documents that show their identity to a taxpayer assistance center, which will make copies of all their documents and certify them. And then they can mail in the W7, the certified copies, and their paper tax return. And they don't have to surrender temporarily their proof of identity, which we really wouldn't want them to do. It will take a while. You need to tell them it's going to take months, but in the long run, it's going to pay off because they're going to get that tax credit. Next slide, please. And this is just a list for you in English and Spanish of the documents that when they go see a VITA site, they should claim. And next slide, please. So I believe I am now turning this over to Sabrina, who is going to talk to you about the ways to file for that tax credit in California. Sabrina?
Thank you so much, and appreciate all that recap. It's always good to keep that refresher. Hello, everybody. My name is Sabrina de Santiago, and I'm the Policy and Research Director with Golden State Opportunity. And next slide, please. And we are a nonprofit that's dedicated to ending poverty. And we have a long history with the Cali ITC and the Young Child Tax Credit. In fact, we were specifically created to do outreach around. Next slide, please. So there are two EITCs. There's the federal credit, which was covered, and then there is also the California EITC. Now, next slide, please. So I'll cover first the federal tax credit. So the federal EITC is a refundable credit, and it has a number of requirements. You can see here on the screen, these are the top line ones. There's a couple of details in terms of what counts as earned income that we could get into. And I'm happy to refer folks to most of that. But more than anything, you have to know that they should need to have a social security number to qualify or legal status. And they need to have lived in the United States for more than half the year. And you see that again, be a US citizen or resident all year. So some sort of legal status. Be 19 or older or be 18 with children and have earned within the yearly income limits. Next slide, please. And here are the income limits. We'll follow up these slides for folks to share so that you don't have to memorize anything. But generally, you can see that for a family of 3 children, it's the maximum adjusted gross income. I always think that's important to note for people if they're filing jointly, that it's after you take some of those deductions. So that'll, just because you made $58,000 as your salary doesn't mean that you may not qualify. You should look to see what your AGI is. And that is for $57,414. Next slide, please. And then the folks always ask, well, what is the maximum EITC, right? So I know now how much I can't, what is the maximum income? Now, how much could I get? And the how much could I get is that it's a fairly large credit, $6,728 for someone with 3 or more qualifying children, $58,000 for 2 qualifying children, $3,600 for 1. And for this year, there's a special, it sounds like I'm selling something, sorry, but because of the AARP, there's a 1-year $1,502 credit available to those people without children. Next slide, please. And now the Cal EITC. The Cal EITC is a credit that's easier to get. So for it, there are just a couple of key requirements. You need to have earned between $1 and $30,000 a year, regardless of the number of your dependents. So if somebody made, that again is AGI. So if someone made 31, don't assume that they're discounted. You should look at what their AGI is. They must have lived in California for more than half the year, and they need to be over 18. The Cal EITC is much more flexible. And as you can see here, there is no requirement that someone have legal status. So undocumented or ITIN filers are eligible for this credit. Next slide, please. And now, of course, though, what's the maximum Cal EITC? Well, because it is available to many more people, it is a smaller credit. For a family of 3 qualifying children, it's about $3,160. And for someone without children, it's about $255. Next slide, please. But there is also another credit that I want to highlight, and that's the Young Child Tax Credit. That is a $1,000 credit, fully refundable for anyone who has a child under 6 years old. The one thing to note here is that it's $1,000 cap per household. It's not $1,000 per child. But if you pair this with your EITC, with your Cal EITC, you could be talking about some good money there. Next slide, please. And what I mentioned a little earlier is that no Social Security, no problem. The California credits, the Young Child Tax Credit and the Cal EITC are open to ITIN holders. Next slide. And then I wanted to highlight our website, caleitcforme.org. Our website has a lot of information. It is available currently in English, Spanish, and simplified Chinese. It is going up in 9 other languages. So we'll have it in everything from Korean, Tagalog, Vietnamese, Russian, Farsi. I'm going to forget the entire list, you'll forgive me. But if it's a major language group that's spoken in California, we have resources for you, and so please reach out. We also have ways there that you can estimate your tax credits and connect you with free tax preparation help. Next slide, please. Oh, one last thing about the website is just to share that we also have lots of collateral that you all can print, or if that's not in your budget, please reach out to us. We may have some flexibility there to help support, but lots of flyers about, who qualifies for what, a quick chart. We have resources and we want to make them available to you. But the website also has how to connect folks with free tax help. And among those 3 different ways to connect are to find an in-person or a drop-off location near you. GSO has a network of currently, you'll forgive me, the number changes on a regular basis. I believe it's about 15 right now, organizations who are doing free tax prep across the state. And so we have that listing. Those are doing any number of different combinations of in-person, drop-off, or some are doing virtual or online assistance directly. And those are just, the local organizations that you already know and trust. We also, as was mentioned earlier, we have a link there to get your refund, which is an amazing site for folks who are comfortable, using websites a little bit more. I always say it's about as hard as setting up like a new app that asks you some questions about your preferences and your settings. It's not It is by no means the IRS free file, which is the last option that you see there. It's much more user-friendly. I would say it's absolutely on par with like the TurboTaxes of the world. And so, and it's free. So, and it also though functions as a virtual VITA site. So if people get stuck or need help, there is somebody there who can help them and review their taxes. Next slide, please. And this is my favorite thing to point out, and I think I always do, is just you can ask a personalized question. So let's say you're like, okay, I think I know everything I need to know to file my taxes. I'm going to get ready. I'm going to do this. But there's this one nagging little thing. Submit it, and you can get help. Next slide, please. And then finally, if folks want to stay connected with Cali ITC, for me, that's our website where we host all of our information, or GSO. These are some of the ways to get in touch with us. We're always sort of churning out updates, new materials, and want to hear from folks on the ground who are doing the work. If there are things we could do to make your life easier, so please don't be shy. My email will be going out in the follow-up, so please connect with me. We're here to help. Thank you so much. Next slide. Because that's the end of me. And I believe now I'm throwing it over to Mandy.
Thanks,
Mandy
Sabrina.
is the extraordinary program. She does an extraordinary work over with United Way of California.
Thanks so much, Sabrina. So Sabrina went over all these amazing tax credits and how to file your taxes for free. I'm going to go over some more information on VITA, like who are these people that are helping you file your taxes for free? And, you know, if you do go to a paid preparer, or if you have a friend or a family member that goes to a paid preparer, what are some things you should keep in mind? So next slide, please. So what is VITA? Next slide. So VITA volunteers, and you'll have to toggle through each of those dots for me. Thank you. They're all unpaid volunteers. They're trained and vetted by the IRS. So I think a lot of people don't realize this, that they get all of their training from the IRS, they get background checks from the IRS, and then they're overseen by a local VITA site on top of that. And most importantly, they are trained to maximize your refund. So they really are trying to make sure that you get every single tax credit that is necessary. And you might be wondering, well, don't tax preparers do that? And actually they don't. We've heard stories from tax preparers saying that preparers charge by the amount of forms they have to fill out. And they might say, well, if you qualify for this and I apply for it, I'm going to charge you some extra money. So we're going to go into that a little bit next. Our VITA volunteers are wonderful. I'm going to put our YouTube video in the chat. So you guys are welcome to go and look at that video, and you guys can kind of get a bigger picture of like what VITA volunteering looks like, who our VITA volunteers are. And most importantly, they never charge you. So there's never going to be a surprise charge at the end where you think it's going to be free and then it's not. Everything with VITA is 100% free. It's free to file your federal taxes, free to file your state taxes. Next slide. So similar, you're going to have to toggle on through those, sorry. So I think one of the biggest misconceptions is people say, well, I don't really want to go to a paid preparer because they might not know as much. And if I pay for a service, I know that it's going to be better, or the quality will be better. And I'm here to tell you that that's not necessarily true. So I think one thing that a lot of people don't know is most of the paid preparers in our country and in our state have very little training and very little oversight. I think the other important thing to note is if they make a mistake, they are not the ones that are held liable. You are the one that is held liable. The IRS will come after you. You will have to fix that mistake, and you will have to pay whatever they might have messed up. So just because that preparer helps you do that, they are not necessarily the ones that are held liable if they make a mistake. And I think the really important thing is, and I mentioned this earlier, they might not be fully aware of some of these great tax credits. Some of them Sabrina mentioned earlier, like the California Earned Income Tax Credit, the Federal Earned Income Tax Credit, or like the Young Child Tax Credit. And so recently Cal Policy Lab did a study, and you can go ahead and press the next button. 92% of people who missed out on the California Earned Income Tax Credit had actually used a paid in-person preparer. So this was a study done by the Cal Policy Lab, and I think it's really interesting, right? Because you would assume that if somebody is a paid preparer, they're going to know about all of these tax credits. So that's a lot of people who are missing out on thousands of dollars in tax credits that they're able to get. And on top of that, they had to pay a paid preparer. Next slide. So we know that you might still have friends or family that are going to go to a paid preparer, or they might have someone help them with their refund. And so I'm going to go through some of these common schemes, things that you guys should be aware of when you guys are doing your taxes this year, and go ahead and toggle through all of those, please. So beware of any tax preparer that charges you before you start the service. So similar to like getting your car fixed or anything like that, you should never pay money up front before they actually start the service. Next is paid preparers charge on average around $200 to $400. Beware of preparers that charge you a percentage of your refund. That definitely is a big red flag. So better yet, file your taxes for free, right? That's the best workaround. The next one is promises to get your refund upfront or faster. We see this a lot. So we see that paid preparers might say, hey, you can walk out today with a check in your hand. And it might be really tempting to do that and say, oh, I'd rather get it now than wait 2 to 3 weeks. The issue is when they do that, they actually are taking a very large portion of your refund. And so you're not getting your full refund. You're giving a huge chunk away to them upfront. So what we are suggesting that families do is file electronically, do direct deposit, and file early. Those are the best ways to expedite your return and make sure that you get your return in a timely manner. And last, similar to getting your money faster, beware of anybody who says that they can process your I-10 application more quickly. So there is a huge backlog at the IRS. They are currently still processing 6 million returns from last year. And this is not only affecting tax returns, it's affecting I-10 applications. So typically an I-10 application takes around 6 to 12 weeks to process. Right now we're hearing it's taking up to a year. So if you have a certified acceptance agent or a paid preparer that's saying, oh, I charge more, but it's because I can get this done faster for you. That is not true. They do not have any control at how fast your I-10 application is accepted and processed by the IRS. So that's a big, big red flag. Next slide. So there are a couple other things I want you all to keep in mind for this year. Next slide. So first thing, go ahead and toggle through both of those, please. First thing is to file early. As I mentioned, they're still processing 6 million returns from last year. So the best way to get your return on time is to file early, file electronically, and use direct deposit if possible. So don't do that paper check. That's going to only make things stretch out a little bit longer. The other one is to gather all of your documents. So that's the best way to maximize your return, right? So we know that there are typical documents like a 1099, a W-2, things like that. You can go to myfreetaxes.org. We have this wonderful checklist of not only required documents, but of documents that will help you maximize your return. So this might include things like childcare receipts, college expenses and college tuition receipts, medical bills, things like that. So we have a wonderful checklist on myfreetaxes.org that you all can check out to get started. Next slide. Go ahead and toggle through those, please. So again, I already mentioned the backlog at the IRS. I want to make sure that everybody, if you walk away and anything you remember, that's the biggest thing I want you to remember is, there's a huge backlog at the IRS. People are waiting a long time for I-10 applications. So make sure you file early. The next one is you cannot receive the second half of your child tax credit payment unless you file. And not just that, but you actually can't receive any tax credit unless you file your taxes. So those wonderful tax credits that Sabrina was talking about, like the California Earned Income Tax Credit, the Federal Earned Income Tax Credit, you can't get any of those things unless you file your taxes. And yes, there are portals. There are things like the Child Tax Credit Portal. But what we say is, why would you go into the portal and just get a portion of your money when you can get a lot more by actually filing a full return? And there's a lot of ways that you can file for free that Sabrina went over earlier, and I'm going to go over again. We really want to encourage people to not use the portal. We want people to actually file a full return so they can get the full amount of money that is owed to them. Another important thing around the child tax credit payments is if you did get those advance payments, you will get a letter in the mail from the IRS that says, hey, this was the amount of money that you got in payments. You need to make sure that you bring that letter with you or you have it with you when you're filing your taxes. If you're married, both spouses will get a letter. So I think there is some confusion because those payments were split between partners. You do need to bring both of those letters with you when you file your taxes. Next slide. So let's get started. How do you file your taxes for free? So if you go to myfreetaxes.org, or if you text the word taxes to 211-211, there are 3 different ways that you can file for free. So the first is on your own. What I love to mention about the self-filing software is we use TaxSlayer and we use Cash App. Cash App used to be Credit Karma. There are no income limits for this. So anybody can file their taxes for free with self-filing software. The software is super, super easy to use. Like Sabrina mentioned, it's almost like setting up your phone, right? It's going to tell you exactly what you need. What's your marital status? What does it say on this specific line of your 1099? So very straightforward, really easy to use. The second is the help from a virtual volunteer or an in-person volunteer. So go ahead and go to the next slide. And so there are also a wide range of resources on our website. So you can go to myfreetaxes.org to get that checklist. You can also go there to make a tax appointment anywhere in the state of California. You can get connected to a virtual volunteer. But we also have things like ITIN resources. We have a tax credit calculator. We have a lot around tax education, which I really love because, you know, if somebody is self-filing on their own, but they don't even know what a 1099 is, we have all of that information on our website. Lots of answers to frequently asked questions, and then also a chat bot to answer all of your tax questions. So again, you can either go to myfreetaxes.org or you could text the word taxes to 211-211. Next slide. All right, that's it for me. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Mandy. An amazing amount of information and just really lucky to have all these folks from California here to share the resources available for California families. So please do put questions in the chat or in the Q&A and we'll get to them shortly. I'm going to actually talk less about how families claim these taxes and how all of you as trusted service providers and those working in schools and other community groups can actually connect families to these tax filing services and get these credits. You can go to the next slide, please, Zoe. So just really briefly, I'm going to highlight some options. We'll be sharing a toolkit, and I can put that in the chat shortly. That is an outreach toolkit for all of you. And so everything we're sharing here, examples of doing outreach, we have resources for. So you don't have to start from scratch and create all of this. One of the things we know that works really well is that when agencies and organizations and schools send text messages, robocalls, or emails to families in their network, letting them know about the CTC and other tax credits and where they can get help, it's very effective. And we really recommend not just sending one message, but sending a few messages. And experience has shown that families continue to go back and cite these messages and visit the websites and phone numbers that are included. And in our toolkit, there are these messages and phone scripts and email scripts in 11 languages. And again, I'll share that toolkit in the chat in a moment. You can go to the next slide, please. Another really great idea, if you work at an agency or some type of organization where there's a hold line or maybe a waiting room, taking advantage of all those moments to spread the word. And so there are also examples in our toolkit of hold line messages or waiting room messages that you can record. Next message, please. Next slide, please. We also have a lot of great resources from partners, including flyers. And so these are just some examples, and really encourage people to hang posters, send flyers home. If you are working a school or another place with kids, send them home in the backpacks. And there are flyers that are a little more content heavy and those that are simpler. So choosing what works for you. And we have those in, I believe, up to 15 languages now, thanks to our partners. So really great. Although if you need other languages, don't hesitate to reach out. And those are also customizable. So if people know you and recognize your logo, we really encourage you to make these flyers your own. Next slide, please. Other options for doing this outreach is integrating questions about the CTC and tax filing into your intake forms or intake processes. So just simply asking people if they want help and if they want information about filing taxes and claiming their credits. And then if you're already sending out resources, if you have a resource library, including FAQs and one-pagers in our toolkit, as well as what Mandy shared, there's information on ITINs, common FAQs that we're always updating. And so we really encourage you to pull these and give them to the families that you're working with. Next slide, please. We also just wanted to share that one of the most effective ways we've seen families get the message about the child tax credit and earned income tax credit and other tax credits is when they hear from people they're accustomed to hearing from and trust. And so in addition to all of you, and maybe some of you are from these places, it also includes schools, school districts, and public benefits agencies. And so we know that when school districts sent out a text message to families, or when an agency that provides SNAP benefits sent out a text message, thousands of people read those messages and clicked the link to learn more and be able to file taxes. And so we actually have two links, and I'll put them in the chat when I'm done talking shortly. One for schools and school groups, whether those are PTAs or the school themselves or educators unions. And so if any of you have relationships with local schools or districts in California or other school groups, we would love for you to share this link. And that includes simple ways that they can spread the word, as well as a pre-recorded training that they can use. And we also have a number of upcoming 30-minute info sessions for groups that are interested in doing school outreach specifically. And then some of you may work closely with state or local benefits agencies. And so I know many in California are already doing this work, but if you do have these relationships, please do use these toolkits to reach out and encourage them to join you in doing this. And we'll put our emails in the chat as well and are happy to help and provide any technical assistance around that. Next slide, please. We also have social media and newsletter copy in our toolkit. Social media alone isn't usually kind of enough to move people, but used in combination with some of these other ways of communicating, it can really get people's attention. Next slide, please. For those who maybe are already doing all this, you're looking for what else can we do? So if you have contact lists, we encourage phone banking or conducting peer-to-peer texting to make sure people have filed their taxes, and if not, supporting them and finding local sites to do so. We also know a lot of groups are hosting Q&As or Facebook Lives, and that can feature a tax specialist, an immigration specialist, immigration attorney, maybe a family law attorney, people who can help really address concerns of families who haven't filed recently or ever and are not really sure how this process works. Next slide, please. We also know that Mandy and Sabrina talked about all the great ways that you can get tax filing assistance, and sometimes people need a little support even before they get to the VITA site, and that not only supports them and helps them save time, it also helps the VITA sites. So if you're working with families directly, it can be helpful to kind of help them connect to a VITA appointment. Often VITA sites have different capacity to speak multiple languages, but sometimes the person making the appointment may only speak English. And so calling with them and making sure that they can communicate to schedule that appointment, working to make those services accessible. We know, I think Mandy shared the document checklist. So making sure that people have everything they need before they go to their appointment, so they don't have to go across town 2 or 3 times, and really going through that with them can be enormously helpful in making sure people can actually claim these credits. Next slide, please. And so again, I'll put this toolkit in the chat, but we have so many great resources. We hope you'll take them and use them. And I'm really excited if you go to the next slide, please, Zoe, to bring on Alan, who's actually going to talk about how he and partners have taken these resources and used them to do some really great outreach in the San Diego area. So take it away, Alan.
Awesome, thank you. Thanks, Julia, and hello to everybody. As Julia mentioned, my name is Alan Gamboa, and I'm with the San Diego Foundation here in Southern California. We just learned a lot about the different credits that are available and how families can access them. And I'll be sharing our journey of implementing CTC work here in San Diego with the expertise from community health workers. Next slide, please. Just a little bit about our foundation. I've shared our mission on the slide, but I also wanted to mention that we recently launched our new strategic plan last year, and it's held up by the key pillars of advancing racial and social justice, fostering the equity of opportunity, and building resilient communities here in the San Diego region. The CTC, expanded CTC work was very well aligned with our commitment to support children and families. I will admit that before starting this work with the child tax credit, we've not really engaged with the tax world in this way, but we had the great opportunity to start because of some generous funding from the David and Lucille Packard Foundation and the EITC Funders Network. Next slide, please. So, like I mentioned, we're the new kids on the block in the tax world, and we knew it would take a village to be able to do this work in a meaningful way. A key partnership was the County of San Diego and the Community Health Worker Coalition that they lead. So throughout the pandemic, we had built deeper relationships with the county and the coalition by helping to support their amazing work around COVID-19. This coalition, they're made up of 13 community-based organizations, and they work really deeply in their communities, and they have very trusted relationships with their community members. So we thought that it would be great to be able to provide support and expand the work that they're doing to include outreach for CTC. And to help us gain our footing in this work, we also joined our local Earned Income Tax Credit Coalition, which is led by the United Way of San Diego. And through this coalition, we were able to meet and expand our network of resources like local VITA sites and the Legal Aid Society here in San Diego. And those last two orgs that I had mentioned, I'll touch on some of the upcoming things that we're working with them on a little bit later, but next slide, please. So not only were we new to this work, but our CHW coalition partners were new as well. So to help get them prepared for outreach, it took a bit of planning and coordination. There's been a lot of trainings from national partners like our hosts today and many other folks. They continue to host trainings throughout the tax season, even prior to the tax season. And we continue to share those with our partners. We've shared toolkits with lots of resources. And since they're new to this work, something that has been most helpful to them were the FAQs, and they take these FAQs with them while they're out in the community, and it helps them answer common questions or challenges that come up, particularly in our case here in San Diego, questions about if it's going to affect their immigration status or their other benefits and things like that. There's a lot of fear around that, but especially for newcomers and refugee population. So it's been helpful to have that resource. One of the things that's also made a pretty instant impact was being able to have localized marketing materials, like Julie was mentioning earlier. So we worked with some of our national partners to brand these flyers, and our partners have also included their branding on this. And it really, yeah, it just helps the community members to recognize them as these trusted entities that they know and have good relationships with. And we've also coordinated several virtual peer-to-peer meetings where all of our 13 partners had a chance to learn from one another's successes and challenges. Next slide, please. So in terms of outreach, once the project started, our CHWs, they immediately went to work. The communities that they focus their day-to-day work on are the non-filers, or I think they're referred to as intermittent filers now. Immigrants and refugees, low to no income adults, and undocumented parents. And San Diego is pretty diverse, as most, if not all, cities in San Diego are. And the CHW Coalition are able to speak 36 different languages. They really work to reach the folks who are typically the ones who fall through the cracks. And I'd say the most helpful strategy for this work was that they fold CTC into their existing outreach. They already do outreach to families for things like COVID vaccinations. They do rental assistance, food distribution, things like that. So it's easy for them to incorporate CTC outreach into, we commonly refer to it as like their menu of resources. They just continuously add on to that. Some other unique methods for outreach are Facebook Live events. One org, they give away turkeys for Thanksgiving. And they also had CTC support and a booth there for CTC. And that was when ctc.org, that portal for simple filing, was open. It's now closed, but it was open for advance payments. A few partners, they also do more broad outreach like text campaigns or mass emails to their clients. They have phone lines and things like that. It's just, they've found nice ways to incorporate it into the things that they already do. Some of the more recent efforts that we're in the beginning phases of starting is through a partnership through being part of that local EITC coalition. But there's a VITA site that we met, and they fortunately have the capacity to provide mobile tax prep services. So they've offered to come to our partners organizations where their clients feel the most comfortable, and they will file their taxes right there and then. Some orgs, it might be difficult to have other organizations come on site with all the COVID restrictions. So what they're doing is they're considering doing what we call like support sites, where they'll have computers and staff available for community members to come in and file their taxes using the getyourrefund.org portal that I know was mentioned earlier. So yeah, a lot of our communities, they don't have access to technology. So being able to do it on site with staff there to help navigate the portal, or maybe even help translate web pages, is really helpful for them. And this type of support site, it doesn't require any special IRS certificate or designation. And lastly, another partnership is with the Legal Aid Society of San Diego, who graciously offered to help our folks with tax disputes. If there's any tax disputes or any complicated tax issues, they'd be available to support them in that way. Next slide, please. And with all of that, although us and our partners are new to this work, and by no means are we tax experts, we were able to have some impact in our region already. And so I thought I'd just share one success story from one of our community health workers, and I'll just go ahead and read it. So Peaceful Land is a recent college graduate living at home with her family. Her wonderful smile radiates when she shares her story about her family and culture. You would never know that her stories would be filled with struggle and perseverance. She comes from a large family of 10, which includes her six siblings, parents, and grandfather. Her family is Karen, and they immigrated to the United States 13 years ago from a refugee camp in Thailand. Money has always been an issue ever since she was old enough to remember. Coming to the States, they struggle to find resources to assist with income for the family. When she talks about the child tax credit and how it's helped her family, her cheerful smile grows even bigger. She shared how the tax credit assisted them dramatically with their finances. She stated, what seems like simple basic needs to some people are actually at times very difficult for us to obtain. The extra income from the child tax credit allowed our parents to buy us school supplies, clothes, and extra food. And this is just one of many stories that's been shared with us. And it does take some work to implement the CTC Outreach, but it's doable. And it's stories like these that really make it worthwhile. Next slide, please. And I think that's it for me. Thanks for having me today, and I'll go ahead and pass it back to you, Julia.
Thank you so much, Alan, and for sharing that kind of your experience, and then also just that story. And I know no one here forgets kind of the actual impact of this work, but it's just really beyond numbers to hear stories, I think is always really powerful. We'll put in the chat our email listserv. So if you want to hear about other upcoming trainings like this one or others, both ones that we provide and partners, as well as new resources, please do sign up. And then if you're interested in tracking the work if you're doing this outreach work, it's limited to kind of certain ways of accessing support, but please do reach out and we can try to help you set up a unique URL. So I just wanted to open it up for questions and invite all the speakers to rejoin, and any of you can kind of respond. I see one question in the chat, and I'll read it out loud and invite anyone to jump in if they feel so inspired. But for Monica, a great question. If we wanted to coordinate a CTC outreach to come to a training or event, how do we start? Who do we message? And that's a great question. I don't know if anyone wants to kind of take a first attempt at answering that.
I was going to say, GSO is always happy to partner with folks to host events. So Monica, if you want to reach out, it's Sabrina@goldenstateopportunity.org. And Mandy and I work super closely together. So if there's also, you know, things that would be important to include from United Way, we can work together and put on a great event about sort of covering some of the basics here and how to connect folks. Let us know. Mandy, I didn't mean to volunteer you, but I feel like we've been a traveling roadshow lately.
We have been, yeah. And I just echo what Sabrina said. We also have some PowerPoint slides in our toolkit that we can share with partners. So that way you guys can actually do it on your own. We have a lot of partners around the state that kind of do a train the trainer model. They go into schools, they go into churches, things like that. And what they do is they train the teachers. So that way the teachers can then go do that training. So we also have resources. So if for some reason we're not available, we're happy to share those resources with you and maybe do like a train the trainer sort of with you guys. So you guys can then eventually do it on your own.
Yeah, just to add to that too. Yeah, I like the train the trainer model. I mean, there's just so many trainings out there. There's a lot of recorded stuff that I know all of us probably can share links to. But I mean, again, you're not going to be the ones actually filing their taxes. So if it's outreach, there's a lot of education that's available for you. And it's not that bad. I was new to the work and it just took a couple of trainings to be able to share. It's good news. And I share it with family members and friends and things like that. So there's a lot of options for you.
You're also,
You want to jump in, Deb?
California, you have so many resources that are also California specific. So that's a great place to start. But you certainly can also reach out to Julia. I also just want to go back for a moment to her mention of signing up for our listserv. One of the reasons to sign up for it is that you'll get new resources, but another is that when this year's non-filer online portal goes active, we'll be putting out information about that. So if you want to make sure that you can help families use that very simplified portal, just sign up on our listserv and you'll get notice about when that started. So
thank you all. Lots of offers of support and collaboration, which is very exciting. I'll just pause to see if people have any other questions they want to put in the chat or the Q&A. And also, if some of you are already doing this work and have found things that work really well or challenges, we definitely invite you to share those as well. And so just drop a note in the chat.
we're going to give you a minute or two to do that. But if you don't have a question or something you want to share about what you are doing, we would love to just know which organization you're with and how many families you're trying to reach out for in this work. So if you're in a child care center and you have 30 parents, or a Head Start program with 200 parents, or a home visiting program with 200 families you visit, if you could put that in the chat, that'd be great. And if people don't have questions, before we log off, we actually have a 2-question poll that we'd like you to answer. And I'm not seeing questions come up in the chat, so I've asked Zoe to start the poll. We'd love to see you guys respond to this. Oh, you guys are fast on the fingers. Usually we have to wait a minute before we start to see people responding. This is great.
Thanks all. And you can feel free to put in the chat, as Deb said, if you want to share kind of who you're working with, how many families, we invite you to do that. And thanks all for participating in the poll so quickly.
Yeah. We'll leave it up for just another minute in case some people are taking a little more time, and then we will share the results so you can all see them. The poll does ask which of our resources are you most likely to use or you've already used. But the other thing you could put in the chat is if there's a kind of resource we haven't prepared that you would find helpful, we would really love to create that for you too. So if there's something you'd like to do where having model language or a printed something would be helpful, you can also put that in the chat and we'll see if we can produce it. Our goal really is to make it as easy and simple and doable as we can for you to reach these families, because it's a unique opportunity. We certainly continue to fight to try and get this expanded credit extended into future years. But even if we can only help families claim it this 1 year, it can make such a big permanent difference for children that we want to make it as easy as we can for you to help them claim this credit. It looks like everybody who is planning on it oh no, we just got another one, I think, or maybe somebody dropped off. Zoe, do you want to share the results? So this is great because it looks like many of you have been doing this already and others of you plan to start or will now consider it. And I'm also very pleased to see that the flyers and the social media posts and the blogs are all really helpful. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sabrina, for talking with us all today. We really appreciate it. And also thank you to Alan and Mandy. Yes, I want to make sure I got the name right. Unless someone else has other questions, and I'm just checking the chat one last time, we will, yeah, it looks like we're done. I hope that means that we were very clear and you got all your questions answered. With that, I think we will end the recording and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks all. Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Mandy.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Take care and have a great day.